talk, we are going to see about some of the common supply chain attacks and their mitigations, and a lot of attacks that do happen commonly in the real world. I am Sindhuja Mahendran, working with ThoughtWorks as an application developer. I've been playing the role of a security consultant for a while now primarily focusing on vulnerability and threat automations and creating insights out of them. The agenda for today is going to be what is software supply chain attack, SolarWinds attack, open source software supply chain attacks, Equifax breach, dependency confusion, arbitrary install of packages, account takeovers, information exposures, and finally the takeaways from the talk. Let's look at what is software supply chain attacks. What is a software supply chain? First of all, a software supply chain consists of the code, the components that is used in the making of software, build, packaging, scripts, etc. The software that we write today is composed of a lot of third-party libraries. Software is rarely defect-free, and likewise, it contains many common vulnerabilities too. So these vulnerabilities can be introduced either intentionally or accidentally in the development or its usage, and the subsequent acquirers or the users would have limited ways of knowing that a vulnerability exists in them and also correcting them to avoid exploitation. So if a vulnerability exists in a system and because it is exploitable, then chances are that the malicious actors would readily exploit them, alter the properties of the software such that they become malicious so that the end user would get compromised or the internal systems of an organization can be infiltrated. So because of all of these reasons, supply chain security becomes utmost important, and also given we use a lot of third-party softwares, be it open source or commercial off-the-shelf software products. So a supply chain attack is any instance where an attacker interferes in the software development lifecycle and thus negatively impacting the end customers or the users. So these can happen in a couple of scenarios, like first being tampering of the libraries, where the libraries are tampered to introduce malicious code. Next is Trojanized software updates, where it comes as a Trojan disguised as a legitimate software. So when these updates become available to the end user, they have limited chance of knowing that this is from an attacker. They do apply the updates and they start acting maliciously. Compromise of a SaaS hosted server. So when this compromise of the server happens, if this server is connected to other internal servers in the network, then possibly they might even get infected, or the attackers would be able to exfiltrate certain sensitive information from the SaaS system itself or from the server. Code signing certificates getting stolen. Code signing certificates is a way of knowing the identity of an entity. So if those get stolen, then the attackers publishing the package would be able to sign the malicious package with a proper code signing certificate, again creating no doubt to the end users. They would just they would just download or apply the updates. The last one is exploiting of the existing vulnerabilities. There are so many existing vulnerabilities that can be exploited by the attackers. And if there are vulnerabilities in the COD system that is run in the organization's tech landscape, then those are also open to exploitation. Supply chain attacks can happen either via a commercial software or an open source software. There is no bias. And with all of these attacks, the threat actors interject themselves either in the upstream, somewhere in the middle, to cause their malicious activities and ill effects downstream to many users. We'll see about SolarWinds attack. This is one of the popular attacks that happened with supply chain. SolarWinds is a company that has network management, database management, and many IT security products. These products are widely used by many government organizations and top companies, and these are Fortune 500 companies. So this attack was carried out using their network monitoring tool called Orion. A plugin was inside which was modified to contain the malicious code, which was passed on to its customers. Let's look at how exactly the threat attacker had done this attack. Attackers gained access to SolarWinds infrastructure. they managed to modify Orient platform plugins module and hid a backdoor code inside it. So this backdoor code would contact the servers that are controlled by the attackers. So the servers that are controlled by the attackers are called as command and control servers or C2 servers. SolarWinds did not find this backdoor code in their library, and they packaged it as a part of their normal updates. So it went on to the customers. The customers, since it came from a legitimate SolarWinds company, they applied all the updates, and it was just dormant for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, this malicious code started acting up, and it started contacting the command and control servers the attackers have executed certain files that it has got from the command and control servers, and then transferred a lot of files from the host system to the command and control servers. This way, the attackers exfiltrated a lot of data from the SolarWinds customers. Imagine with this one change that happened, the threat actor was able to exfiltrate a lot of sensitive data from an array of clients, and all of them were top companies and government organizations. So that is how widespread a software supply chain attack is. And it also presents the unfortunate fact that most of the organizations are unprepared to handle such attacks. What are the learnings that we have from the SolarWinds attack that we have seen? So these type of attacks are very hard to prevent because it comes from a trusted vendor. So SolarWinds attack, in this, the attacker had embedded malicious code inside the plugin, and it came as a part of the software update itself. So this was hard to detect, and this was a high profile attack, making it also difficult to detect the presence of the attackers and the data exfiltration that was happening. The learnings that we have is the first one is principle of least privilege. So while establishing a communication between the SaaS system and other internal systems, it's important to follow the principle of least privilege such that you establish only the communication that is needed for the SaaS system to do its work. Next is isolated deployment of SaaS. The SaaS applications must be deployed separately from the internal network, because if a SaaS system gets compromised, then the other systems in the network should not get compromised because of that. Last one is threat modeling. When a SaaS system is getting deployed into the organization, oftentimes the security reviews focus only on the patch management, where how quickly a patch is applied when a readily exploitable vulnerability happens in a SaaS system. But if this update mechanism is compromised, what would be the impact that it can have on the infrastructure? What is the impact that the other systems can take, and what data gets exposed? All of this is not modeled. So all of this is not thought about. Threat modeling is an exercise where that will let you think about all of this, identify all the threats that a SaaS system and around the SaaS system can have. Open source software supply chain attacks. According to a report, about 90% of all applications are made of open source libraries, and about 11% of them contain vulnerabilities. And software supply chain attacks targeting open source are a major issue for the enterprise. This means most of your application consists of code that you did not write. The vulnerabilities in the open source software or dependencies, which you cannot control as tightly as the code that you have written, causes significant potential security risk. If, let's say, one of the dependency in your application has a vulnerability, then it means that your application might be vulnerable as well. If such a vulnerability exists in a dependency and it is not exploitable today, chances are that it becomes exploitable in the future, because the amount of changes that happens in the code base as well as in the package is so much that it changes quickly. So being able to leverage a lot of open source development also means that you have so much security risk as well. An unpatched vulnerability or a malicious attack to a dependency can affect your supply chain deeply. So dependencies must be scanned periodically for vulnerabilities. It also includes application dependencies in serverless, container images, and open source space images that are used to build on top of it. This is one of the popular breaches, Equifax breach, which contain also open source library which is involved in the breach. Equifax is a credit reporting agency managing the financials of millions of individuals and companies. So what is the data that they store? Essentially, the personally identifiable information of individuals like name, address, emails, phone numbers, social security numbers, and a lot of financial data about them, both companies and individuals. So what happened during the breach was a lot of millions of PII of individuals and companies got stolen, their financial records as well. And the attackers gained access to an array of systems inside Equifax. So they were able to exfiltrate all of such millions of information. It took months for them to discover the attack. So the attackers were hiding inside the systems for months together, and they were exfiltrating a lot of data. The impact was so huge that the stock prices fell down. The CEO had to step down. An enormous amount of money was spent on the remediation of the breach itself. Let's look at how this Equifax breach itself happened in detail. So attackers generally they scan the web for any vulnerable servers. One fine day, when they were looking for any vulnerable servers, they found Equifax's consumer dispute portal. So this was having a Apache Struts library, which was vulnerable. Apache Struts library is an open source web application framework used for creating enterprise Java applications. So this Apache Struts library had a vulnerability that once you put in a malicious code inside the content type header and send that HTTP request, the Struts library could be tricked into executing that malicious code and opening up the system in which the Struts library is installed to further intrusion. And that is how the attackers went into the system, and they were able to find the consumer personally identifiable information in them. From there on, again, they were able to move on to other additional servers that are located inside the network, because the network was not properly segmented. And also, the username and passwords were available in plain text, which also led to further intrusion inside other systems. After gaining a lot of these information, the attackers wanted to exfiltrate all of this data to their systems. So the attackers started exfiltrating all of this data in an encrypted fashion. And this happened for about 76 days, which was not detected at all. So Equifax, like any other company, had tools which will analyze the traffic, decrypt, analyze, and then re-encrypt the traffic so that the data exfiltration attacks like these could be prevented. But because of the certificate that got expired, which is very essential to do this process, this certificate is got from a third party and has to be renewed periodically. So prior to 10 months from this attack, Equifax had not renewed this certificate, and because of which they were not able to sniff out this data exfiltration that had been happening. Once they renewed the certificate, they were able to find that the attack was happening, and they were able to see the data getting exfiltrated to attackers' servers. So till the time they found the attack, there was a lot of millions of data were already exfiltrated from this servers. Let's look at the learnings from Equifax breach. To all of these biggest breaches, not just one security failure that leads to, but a series of security failures would lead to this biggest breaches. Of the Equifax's attack that we saw, an open source vulnerability which had patch already available but had not been applied also played a major role in letting the attackers into the system. So the learning that we have here is first, patch management. So whenever you have systems and applications, do scan them for vulnerabilities. If the vulnerabilities are present and patches are available, apply the security patches quickly. So define SLAs. SLAs are service level agreements for your service level agreements. SLAs are SLAs are documents where you have the deadlines defined for vulnerabilities of different severity levels. Next is network segmentation. Computer networks should be properly segmented and appropriate policies and firewalls should be put in place. Also, high critical systems should be segregated from other systems such that there's no unnecessary connection with critical system. In case of an attack, network segmentation will help you limit the attack to only some part of the network. If a system gets infected with a malware, then chances are less that it gets easily spread to the other parts of the network. Data governance is the key. So how susceptible an organization is to an attack also depends on the data that it is held in the organization. In case of Equifax, we see that it contained a lot of personally identifiable information as well as the financial records, which is a very valuable asset for an attacker. So data governance is a set of practices and principles that an organization use to protect and manage the data assets that it has. Like, for example, who has access to what data? Is the data encrypted at rest and in transit? How long should the data be retained, and so on. Next, we'll see about some of the common patterns of supply chain attacks. All of these attacks can be mitigated by implementing certain practices and thereby reducing the risk for an organization. The first one we are going to see about is dependency confusion. Second is arbitrary install of packages. Third is account takeovers. And the last one is information exposure. Malicious package upload into popular companies. In February this year, ethical hacker named Alex Birsan was able to upload malicious packages into big companies like Apple, Microsoft, Uber, and so on, over 35 companies likewise. So how did he do that? Some of the organizations have their own internal registries where all their dependencies are present, and they pull either from the internal registries or from the public repositories. Whereas some organizations use a mix of both, where they pull in from their private registries as well as from the public repositories. So build tools and the package managers automatically pull in dependencies from the public repositories and the private registries. Using this design flaw as against pulling from the private registry and the public repository, this attack was targeted. He was somehow able to know the names of packages that is inside the organization's private registries through some medium where the information got leaked. He created the same package names exactly of what is present inside the internal registries of these organizations, posted them in the public repository, and just waited idly. After some time, the malicious packages got pulled in automatically by the developers and their build tools into their environment. So this is a dependency confusion attack, where the user is tricked into installing malicious package from the public repository instead of pulling from the private registry. So there are a couple of steps that you can do to prevent them. The first one being use of package managers that support namespace modules. Second one is keeping the package names of the organization's registries private. Third one being use of only reputable open source packages and verify them before installing. The second and the third one are practices that rely on people to follow. First one is more being concrete. Let's also take a look at the example of namespaced modules. So NPM as a package manager has a concept of scoping. So scoping is a way of grouping all the packages of a user or an organization together such that only the user or an organization who have access to that scope would be able to publish new packages or updates. And this would prevent the confusion of looking up from a different repository. So in this example, you can see that the name of the package is foo. Actually, it is prepended with the scope my company. So once this is explicitly specified, there is no chance that it is the package foo. is looked up from a different public repository. So it would always look for within the scope and thereby preventing the confusion of looking up from a different repository. Arbitrary install of packages. In JavaScript applications, how we have defined scripts inside our package.json file, the dependencies also do have scripts defined in them. And package managers like NPM would let you run them arbitrarily behind the screens without you specifying any explicit commands to run those scripts. The scripts that are defined inside the packages would generally be on the lifecycle methods like prepare, pre-install, post-install, and so on. So for example, if npm install command is run, then if there are any scripts that inside the dependency for post-install, that would get automatically run. In the previous example where we saw the attacker was able to install malicious packages into the companies like Apple, how did he even confirm that these got installed inside these organizations, right? He was able to find them by writing a small script inside the post-install script, wherein it would capture the host name and some other less intrusive information about the host in which it got installed. And so once the packages got installed, this script got automatically executed, collecting the information about the host and sending it to the attacker. And this is how the attacker got to know that these packages got installed in these environments. The next type of attacks is typo squatting. Typo squatting attacks leverage the typoed versions of package that is present in the registries. So cross-n and cross-n are one such example of typo squatting attacks. Cross-n is a legitimate package that is used to manage the environmental variables across different environments. A similar lookalike was created with the same name like cross n without the hyphen alone. So just from looking at the names, it is very difficult to distinguish between these two. So the cross n, the malicious package, had exactly the same functionality as that of cross n. And then it also contained a backdoor code to capture all the environmental variables and send it to the attacker's servers once it gets installed inside the environment. So all of these attacks are kind of dependent on extracting the information and sending it to the attackers by using the scripts that are automatically run. So your dependency, unless it really depends on the scripts from the scripts in them to actually work, then you can run npm install ignore scripts to prevent these unwanted scripts from running and also become safe of not running a malicious code present inside the script. The next in the pattern of supply chain attacks is accounts takeover. Attackers generally take over the maintenance account of popular libraries and they publish malicious packages. So if you are a maintainer of a widely used package, then your accounts become very valuable. Or if you have access to your organization's registry in npm, for example, then you will be able to publish a new version of the package. That means the account becomes valuable for an attacker. So there was a Ruby gem called strong password, which was updated from one version to another version without any specifications in the changelog file. A developer got curious of this missing changelog file and then started digging deep to only find that there was a backdoor code that was present to reach out to the command and control servers of attackers and then open up the environment for further remote code execution. The developer got alarmed and notified the maintainer of this Ruby gem. And then the maintainer found that the Ruby gem account was compromised and the attackers had taken the ownership of the package, published a vulnerable version of the software, thereby impacting all the end users of this package. So if the credential setup is not strong enough, then there is a higher chance that the attackers can exploit this weakness and then take over the account, publish a vulnerable version of the package. There are about 579 password attacks that happen every second, which accounts for about 18 billion password attacks that happen every year. So it's important that across your supply chain, whatever the account that you have, be it GitHub, Docker, NPM libraries, NPM, Ruby gems, whatever, ensure that you have set strong password and enable multi-factor authentication and do SSO integration wherever possible. The impact of this compromise is huge because of the popularity of the library itself and the impact it causes to the end users. Information exposure. With increasing usage of open source, there's also increase in contribution to the open source software, where it becomes indispensable to collaborate with other developers in the public. So because of which there's a higher chance that the credentials and other sensitive information get leaked in the public to all these unknown developers, which will again lead to probably an account takeover or leads to any tampering of the libraries in the and inserting of malicious code. So it's important that we guard against all of this. And tools like Git secrets, Talisman can be used for preventing and check-in of those secrets that are present. So these tools can be configured as pre-commit hooks. So whenever you make a commit, these tools will scan for the presence of any secrets. And if there are any secrets, it will not let you commit those code. And if you are worried about any existing secrets that are present in the repo already, then use tools like Git secrets and Trufflehawk to scan the repository to find any secrets. If there are any secrets found, do rotate it immediately and then take it from the Git history. This is with the packages. There's also another area of browser extensions, which also have a lot of permissions on the browser. So there are browser extensions like Nano Defender, Nano Ad Blocker. All of these are browser turned malwares. So these browser extensions, they are used to block ads and other unwanted pop-ups. So these extensions also had access to HTTP methods that goes on in the browser, session cookies, the OS details, and so on and so forth, and had a lot of browser control. So when these extensions got sold out to another developer, they introduced a malicious code inside the extension, which again started hijacking a lot of social media accounts of the users because they had a lot of browser control, and they started hitting likes from the accounts of the users, which was unknown to the users for a long time. And this was also hard to detect because this extension, as we saw, already had access to many HTTP requests and responses and session cookies. So which means, imagine the amount of exposure this browser plugin, this browser extension has. So it's important to always look out for what permissions that each browser extension asks for and grant only the necessary permission absolutely needed for the browser extension to do its work. So the takeaways from the common supply chain attacks are, first is principle of least privilege. Whatever the system that you have, limit the privileges of the user on that system, and also from one application to another application also. So for example, if one application needs access to the user's personal information, then the access key that is used to fetch the information should not be fetching any health information of the user or financial information. So it should be able to retrieve only the user's personal information. And also exercise defense in depth, where you don't apply security controls at the perimeter level, but also at the system level and in the application level and so on. Next is vulnerability and patch management. For all the systems that you have, ensure that you have different tools to scan the vulnerabilities in them. Once vulnerabilities are found, apply the security patches quickly, adhering to the SLAs that are defined in an organization. If you have a COTS product that is deployed in your system, if you have a COTS product also running, ensure that you also keep them up to date and the security patches must be applied quickly. Identity and access management. Your identity is very important to be guarded. So set a strong password, enable multi-factor authentication, and wherever possible, do SSO integration. So in case of collaborating with other developers in the public or in your organization's private registries, ensure that proper authorization is set up such that no unwanted developer is having any publish rights to the repository, so that they would be able to take over the package or put in malicious packages inside the organization's registry or the public repository itself. So security can't be 100% done always, but it's always a matter of making it more complex for the attackers to move into the system, and then making it complex for them to get to the objectives that they need, because attackers in general always look out for low-hanging fruits. Thank you.